Thanks for coming and you're coming back. I'm Richard Robinson. We have a couple of people who are remote, and for those of you who are remote, questions in the chat seemed to work pretty well last time, so then we'll just do that again if you have questions. But if that's not working for you, if no one is paying any attention whatsoever, raise your hand with your hand raising thingy, and we'll try to get you that way. I realized much belatedly for those of you who were here at the last session that there are some introductory slides that are accompanying every lecture, and I completely lost track of how to get to them and to show them to you, so I didn't and can't. One of them is about the auction and sponsors and things like that. Another one is a land acknowledgement. And if you're in another session today, I hope you'll look carefully at that because I can't show it to you here. And there may even have been another one, but now I can't remember what it was. Anyway, thank you. Welcome for coming. For those of you who weren't here in the earlier session, that session was all about building hoophouses. This session is all about growing in them. There will be a very small amount of overlap because we'll talk about some of the structural issues that feed into growing, but this is mostly about growing in hoophouses. This will be repetition for some of you, but I'm Richard Robinson. I grow at Hopestill Farm, which is in Sherborn, about 20 miles north of Boston. I do have 3 hoophouses here. This is a stationary 96-foot one. These are 2 48-foot long rolling hoophouses. I can talk a little bit about rolling hoophouses if we get to the end, but pretty much, if you were here in the earlier session, you heard what there's here about that. I also have outdoor gardens, and we do Christmas trees, and we do a little bit of hay, mostly no-till. I don't bring tractors into my hoophouses, and that has some implication for fertility, which we'll talk about. So considerations for indoor growing. The most fundamental one is it will never rain inside the hoop. For better or for worse. For better, because you can keep your leaves dry, as dry as you like, as dry as the humidity will allow you to keep them. But for worse, because for one thing, you have to supply all the water that plants need, obviously, but also because rain has some beneficial effects on soil, washing salt down into the soil, which may build up over time on the surface, especially if you're putting in a lot of bag fertilizer. Things like nitrates, potassium salts, things like that. You may end up with some salts. I think there are ways to deal with those. There's no reason you can't make it rain inside your house. You could take the cover off, but why don't do that? But you can also just turn on a sprinkler and just let it rain for 4 or 5 hours a couple times in the winter, and you'll probably accomplish most of what you need to accomplish in terms of soil maintenance by doing that. If you're using a lot of compost, and if you're not using very much bag fertilizer, you may never see this problem. I have not. I use a little bit of some potassium sulfate, I guess, some nitrate, and a little bit of manganese and some micronutrients. But I've never seen a problem like this soil touch right. I've never seen it. Fertility has to come through the door, and that is really important. It is really, really easy to under-fertilize, under-nutrientize your hoophouse because you have to stick it in a wheelbarrow and you have to bring it in. And I like to add at least an inch of compost to every one of my beds every year, and that's a lot of wheelbarrows. It's probably a yard per bed in my 96-foot house. That's about an inch is about a yard of compost, and that's about 16 wheelbarrows full for each of those beds, and that's just to get an inch of compost. Plus, I like to bring in leaves, and those are another thing. Commit yourself to doing it. It's absolutely worth doing. I'm not trying to scare you off, but you do have to do it. You do have to make sure that over time you're not sort of starving the plants. I did for a few years, actually, and especially my larger house, which doesn't move, and I can't keep moving stuff in from the outside. I realized at the end of 4 or 5 years of growing that I had kind of tapped things out, and it showed. And so I did the right thing. Temperature, I say, is trellising is easy, and this is one of the brilliant things about hoop houses is that you have this superstructure, and if you build it right, you can hang anything you want on it, including fully loaded tomatoes, and that's not something that should be discounted. We'll talk a little about that when we get to the tomatoes, because they're the big heavy crop that the trellising really provides you some benefits for. Temperature, yes, absolutely. It'll get warmer in there. It'll be warmer in the summer. It'll be warmer in the winter. It'll be especially warm when the sun is out. It will not be as warm when the sun is not out. And nighttime, you may see, instead of the outdoor temperature, which will go like that, the indoor temperature may go like that, but it will go down. You will not be able to grow tomatoes in December in your hoop house without some supplemental heat. And by the way, I should have said at the beginning, this workshop is about growing without heat. I grow in greenhouses without heat, single layer plus insulin. But it's also, you really have to worry, because when the sun comes out, your hoop house will heat up fast. And I mean in like 10 minutes, you could go up 10 degrees. And that's not bad. Going from 55 to 65 is spectacular. Going from 75 to 85 is great too. But going from 80 to 90 can be a problem in the middle of the summer. You really need a plan for either opening your hoop houses with the roll-up sides first thing in the morning, every morning, or as I do, leave them up when it gets to be mid-June, late June certainly. I just leave them up for the rest of the summer. It gets cool at night. I am not an aggressive environment control grower. And if you were an aggressive environment control grower, you probably would have an increased yield from what I get, because you can manipulate indoor temperatures even without supplying heat. But it does require a lot of manipulation of those sides and manipulation of humidity. So take that to mind. And what you can't do is go away for the day in spring, summer, or fall without thinking about your winter. You can go away for the day. Even if it were sunny right now, and even if it were 50 outside, and we had 6 hours of sun, I know that the ground is cool enough. I can leave it for the day, and it's not going to be a problem. Because there's one combination, but maybe but starting around March, and maybe even February, because our days do start to get longer in February. Unusually warm days in February with strong sun. I'll make sure that my vents are open today, and by vents I mean these peak vents here. Why did that? Oh, I know. Because my computer, which is not plugged into power, is feeding this, and so it said a little sleep. But anyway, that won't happen again because I'll be moving on. The peak vents are very handy insurance, because you can just leave them open, and pretty much even in, I don't want to say July, but certainly in May and most of June, you could forget to roll up your sides if the peak vents are open. Your house will get too hot. You won't like it when you go in there, but you won't cook your plants. Whereas if your peak vents are closed, you will. Hoop house growing will amplify your skills and your weaknesses, and that is so true. And I am here to tell you. Okay. One of the things to think about as you begin to grow in a hoop house is what your bed layout is going to be. Generally, most people certainly grow in 48-inch on center beds, 30 inches wide, 18 inch for the path. As I said earlier this morning, I tend to grow with in fact about 2 feet of growing space and about 2 feet wide paths, because I don't like to creep narrowly through my paths, especially when the tomatoes are all like this, and it's just hard for me to enjoy that. So I tend to take 2 feet path. Nonetheless, at 48 inches on center, your plants will get plenty of width. A couple of things that are important for hoophouse in particular is I think it's really valuable to have a single wider path in the middle. And I don't mean hugely wider, but if you think of that as being sort of your main passageway right down the middle, you want to be able to bring a wheelbarrow down it without banging stuff on either side. And so that's, I just push when I'm transplanting my tomatoes or whatnot into the 2 beds on the side, I tend to push them out a little bit just to give myself a little more. I really like to have a 3-foot walkway at the front end. In other words, on one of the gable ends, where I can walk through that door, take a right with my wheelbarrow, and not bang into a plant. So I like to have at least 3 feet there. And then at the far end, you really only need a couple feet, just enough room to go back and forth. And maybe when you get down with an empty wheelbarrow, turn it around, looking around like this, and pushing it back up the road while you harvest. Edge beds really can be a challenge. I talked about this earlier. This is my house here, and you can see how even by the time we get to here, just a few feet out, a couple feet out, really, the house is starting to bend in, and it makes it a real pain to work that edge bed as as generously and as assiduously as you would work a middle bed, because you can't really get to it from the other side, and you're bent over. I have kind of, in this house, given up on the northern edge bed. And instead I put in some benches here, which turned out to be the best place in the world to dry onions. I think it's going to stay there. I've given up some indoor space, but it's indoor space that wasn't doing much good. You could do better than that, but that's kind of the compromise that I made there. But you want to think about your edge beds and how to maximize that. By the way, a 30-foot wide house can't fit 8 4-foot beds on center. That edge bed's probably going to be a foot narrower anyway. And if you narrow it down to a 2-foot bed with some extra room outside the walkway, you might be a happier person than trying to maximize it right out to the side. But your mileage may vary. What to grow and when to grow it? It's entirely a question of what your goals are. My goals are to make money farming and to not drive myself crazy while I do it. That means not trying to grow as much as I possibly can every moment that I can. I work by myself. I don't have a crew that I could shunt out into Siberia and say, just keep doing that. And I really like the idea. I was talking to somebody earlier about Elliot Coleman. I got my sort of mindset reading Elliot Coleman's work about winter growing. And I said, oh yeah, that's what I should be doing. Is I should be just trying to push things as far as possible into the winter. And so I like to grow winter crops a lot. And then a place to hang. A hoophouse is a really nice place in the winter. Just walk in, out of the wind, out of the cold, especially on a sunny day. And I'll tell you, I did that in my first hoophouse. I framed in a window I'd taken out of my house. So it wasn't plastic anymore, it was a window right there. And I said, I'm going to make a little space to sit right here. I'm going to come down with a cup of tea, and I'm just going to look out the window, and it's going to be great. I never did. I got a nice house. I like to sit inside and drink my tea in there. I always got stuff I want to do inside the hoophouse, and it wasn't hanging out. So you can, a friend of mine actually put a bed in his hoophouse and sleep out there sometimes. But know your goals. What to grow? Andrew Mefford. Somebody can tell me if I can.
Growing for market.
Growing for Market, thank you very much. Who edits the Growing for Market newsletter. If you don't get it, I really recommend it. It's a very good monthly set of articles about different aspects of growing for market. He's written a book called The Hoophouse and Greenhouse Growers Handbook, and he talks about the 8 top crops for growing in hoop houses, all different descriptions. Those crops there: tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, peppers, lettuce, greens of different kinds, including spinach, which I'll talk about especially. Microgreens, I'm not so sure about that, and herbs, especially basil, just because it's so temperature sensitive. They will make you money. They really can make money. By the way, I would be happy to send anybody a PDF of this. My email address will be on the last slide. So take notes if you want to, but you're welcome to. Just wait for the PDF. And if you weren't to the first one as well, or even if you were, I can send you that one as well. And if you have questions as we go along, just raise your hand. You can grow anything, but you can't grow everything, probably. You can see a little bit. Yes, sir.
Just when you were talking about your crops, do you do succession planting for the tomatoes, use eggplants and peppers?
Succession planting?
Yeah.
Rather than just plant them once and
right.
go through the season. Yeah, that's a good question. Let me hold off on that when I get to those plants. I just want to point out here, this is not my slide. Boy, that's beautiful, isn't it? My stuff doesn't look like this for the most part, I'm sorry to say. But this person has got tomatoes, which are staked, and there's no reason to stake a tomato in a greenhouse. But then has lettuce on the side. And I do this, by the way. I will start planting lettuce in mid-February, maybe early February, in my beds where I will then put my tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, because the tomatoes and eggplants and peppers won't go in until early April, mid-April, and the lettuce will grow quite well, even after I put those in. And those transplants, the eggplants and so forth, those transplants don't need that whole bed until that lettuce is ready to harvest, and then just get out of it. It works pretty well. There's some other things that we can maybe talk about those as well that also would work well. But lettuce works well, spinach, arugula, quick turnovers.
What's your first and last frost date?
Second.
Your first last frost date? What zone are you? Like not the greenhouse. I'm just trying to translate it.
So, as I say, we're about 20 miles west of Boston. I can never remember what zone that is. I think it's 5, but I could be wrong. Yeah.
5, 6 line.
What is it?
It's on the 5-6 line.
It's on the 5-6 line. There we go. Where I live is for some reason unusually cold. When Worcester freezes, we almost always give a light frost. When Worcester has a frost, we almost have a light frost. But you know, people down the road. First frost dates, I've had them at the beginning of September. You know, unusual weather, but it happens. I don't worry very much about those in Hoophouse, but we get regular frost by mid-October, and then stop having regular frost in early April. It seems like I don't pay enough attention to that. Anyway, so there are ways to maximize your indoor growing rather than taking everything out and putting something new in the bed. You can do this airplane stuff with small stuff, with stuff that's got a quick turnover. I'll tell you, I've got beet greens. Everybody ever plant, not beets, which you then clip the greens off of, but old blood beet greens. It's a neat crop. It grows this giant beet by the end of the season. I think it's as big as a basketball. And it makes these absolutely beautiful greens. It's called bullfrog. And I planted some in February or something, fully intending to rip them out. And I never did because I kept having somebody ask me for beet greens. I sell a lot of individual retail orders to people who come by and farm. People kept asking me beet greens, so I left them in and I planted my tomatoes next to them. And the beet greens kept up all the summer, and the tomatoes seemed to do just fine. I'm not recommending it, but it is something to think about, at least experimenting with, and Swiss chard as well. Irrigation, fertility, weed control, the standard stuff you got to worry about. I use drip irrigation, I think, in a Hoophouse. It's really hard to use overhead irrigation at Hoophouse. You got to string the run. You can't put in sprinklers because half of the water will hit the side or the top and roll down the sides. You really have to either, if you want to do overheads, you got to hang stuff down low and use little wobblers, or you got to use drip. And I think drip, there's no reason not to use drip. It's great stuff. I use usually 2 lines per bed, 6-inch spacing on the emitters. And then I make sure to put a valve, use a valve right here, at the top of each line, because I always want to be able to cut off a line and not have to shut the whole system down to work on it. If say with a line of cucumbers, those cucumbers succumb to cucumber beetle or mildew or something like that during the course of the season, and it's too late to plant something else, I just shut them off. So I don't have to waste the money. I think that it's well worth the extra $1.50 and whatever the emitters. I do bring in about 1 inch of compost per year. I do a soil test every couple of years. I tend to combine my hoop house. So instead of hoop house 1 soil test, hoop house 2 soil test, I'll put them together. It's not accurate, but I hope it averages out over time. Save me $25 in the test. I use more nitrogen than I used to. That's one of those things that I realized after 4 or 5 years of growing, I was starting my plants. I use blood meal for cold soil because it's a nice, quick nitrogen release. So when I'm transplanting these peppers and the tomatoes in early April, I'll sprinkle a little blood meal and also some Nature Safe, which I like a lot. It's a nice product. You could use feather meal, but Nature Safe, it's a blend of different release nitrogens. But if you're going to use feather meal, I definitely use blood meal because feather meal is real slow release. It'll last much of the summer, but it won't give you much of a good start. There's the Nature Safe 1301 bucks. And there's another Nature Safe product, 10, 2, 3, or something like that. They're in the no football corner. I recommend the no football corner. I have to because I'm on the board. Mulch your paths. Your tomatoes, your peppers, they're going to take up like 3 inches of your bed, and the rest is just open for weeds. You might as well mulch, and a nice thick mulch in your paths will allow your plants to reach their roots underneath, and by golly, they sure will, and feed there as well as in the bed properly. You really want to pay attention to your paths. Some people use plastic. I don't. I really, really like leaves. If you've been to anything else that I've talked about, you will know that I am a proselytizer for using leaves. I think they're just the best mulch in the world. I'll talk to you very often about it some other time.
Leaves on the bed so it was thinner.
Well, I am half deaf, so I'm going to have a really hard time here. I appreciate it.
Do you use leaves in the beds during the winter as well? Because we've tried that and they seem to choke anything that's, if there's stuff that's overwintered.
Oh, you mean on the bed itself?
Yeah.
While you're trying to grow something in that bed? I know my lettuce is weed free. Arugula as well. And that leaves swept up on the bed really have to be for something that's doing most of the growing up here, the fruits right here. For stuff that's like this low, no, I wouldn't. Yeah, that's the question. Yeah.
What's your schedule for irrigation? What amounts?
I wish
for tomatoes.
I wish I had a smart answer for you, and I do not. I am embarrassed to say this, but I have a really, really good well. I could produce a lot more water than I use, and so I don't really pay enough attention. So the answer to your question is probably in the summer, each of my beds is receiving 2.5 hours of drip from 2 lines every day. Okay. I could probably get by with much less, certainly once the tomatoes get up. One summer I read something and I thought it was interesting. The tomatoes, once they begin flowering, don't really need the water. And I said, well, that's interesting. I'll just turn off the irrigation.
Indeterminate.
The Israelis tell me it's true, and apparently it's true. You can grow them in a desert. Once they get to be flowering and producing their fruit, they don't seem to care. I'm not recommending this, but if you want an interesting experiment, try it. I didn't see a difference. I really didn't see it. It was interesting. So that's the answer to my question. I don't. Okay. We got that point back. Okay. I now want to talk individual crops. So if you have questions, just let me know. They are absolutely the biggest money maker for you, the biggest potential. I mean, your markets may vary, and you may have somebody who will pay you a lot of money for basil, week after week after week. And if you do, I recommend you grow, except you got to be worried about the things you have to worry about with basil. But basil is easy to grow. It does like to grow in the water side. The leaves will be nice and tender because they're not bashing about in the wind. And you can make a lot of money if you've got a chef who will pay you week after week after week for basil. I don't. I'm doing a pretty wide range of things. But they are, on average, tomatoes are biggest money. You can get significant season extension from them. You could start them earlier, you could run them later. However, my experience has been that not every variety really tastes very good by the time you get to mid-October. You can harvest them, people will buy them, but they're what you could have gotten in the summer in the Stop and Shop. But there are some varieties which I don't, by the way, I'm not trying to recommend these particular varieties for you to grow. I want to talk about each one of them. But these varieties I have found do taste better at the end of the season than the other ones I grow. And there's some historicity here in what I plant. There's a lot of tomato varieties in the world. And I have not run through all of them to tell you these are the best ones. I just kind of like these. Big B, big standard slicer. Estiva, also a good slicer. Doesn't get quite as big as Big B, but may hold on a little bit longer to a kind of a mid-sized slicing tomato. Neither one of them particularly disease hardy. If you have a problem with leaf mold the way that I do, you may very well end up seeing a lot of your lower leaves just lose it, but they tend to keep producing. Pink Wonder, I will not recommend Pink Wonder unless you are interested in a pink tomato that is leaf mold resistant and you have a market for cracked tomatoes, because these guys will crack. The taste is, it's so good. Pink tomatoes in general taste better than red tomatoes. They just do. And Pink Wonder is a good Hoophouse, disease-resistant tomato, but they will crack. I don't think I picked one last year, but I wrote for me. Yeah.
We pick brandywines, and it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
But we have some customers that would pick through the pile of tomatoes and go, "That's the one I want."
Yeah.
And they pass up these beautiful, perfect globular red ones, and they're like,
"Yeah,
not interested. I want."
That's a smart customer. And on this one in particular, in general, in the business we're in, you have to educate your customers. I have not been able to educate my customers yet that pink tomatoes are better and don't worry about the cracks. People come to my CSA and I say, take 4 tomatoes or whatever it is, and the pick ones are back. Great, I'll leave it for them. Edox, so Sakura, very common large cherry, especially for early production. It's a really good cherry tomato. The taste is excellent. It's not complex, but it is good. It's excellent. It's not complex, but it's terrific. How about that? I like Apero, which is a sort of like a fat plum shape. It's kind of like this rather than round, but it doesn't have really skinny neck of the plum. And you see these gorgeous trussels. It gets a little small as the season goes on, but maybe that's maybe I should repeat that one. Jasper is nice. I don't know if you ever grown Jasper. It's a tiny little cherry tomato. The thing is, seems to be bulletproof. It will take over your hoop house and it won't die from leaf mold, and it just keeps growing. The problem is almost every, if you try to pick them individually, almost everyone will crack up at the calyx end. But I started doing this a little bit 2 years ago and then a lot this past year. Don't pick them individually, pick the whole truss, put them on top of a box of other cherry tomatoes. The thing is just gorgeous to look at. And they don't crack. And every single one of my customers who took one home said, "What was that tomato? So good. It's just really good." Yeah.
We did the same thing with Jasper.
With Jasper, it's
Yeah,
such a
we
great
just flip
tomato.
off the things, because you can't actually pick them off.
You can, and you'll throw a third of them away at least. And then Edox, which I grew for the first time, that's this one here, is another truss harvest tomato. You can pick them individually. There's no reason you shouldn't, except that they will ripen almost every single one of them at the same time. You might have to clip off a couple of bottom ones that are not fully ripe. And you've got this enormous truss. And the thing probably weighs half a pound. And that you probably, I have not explored this market, you probably can sell that to restaurants that are looking for, bring to your table a beautiful salad-based meal with some tomatoes. Because when cherry tomatoes on a truss, it looks like professional. It's just a crime. Anyway, and they're really good. And I've also put those on top of cherry tomatoes. And they go quick. And they just, I love them. Anyway, determinants, I very quickly, just in case you don't know, all the tomatoes I've talked about so far are indeterminates. They will keep growing, keep producing, over the course of the season. A determinate tomato will produce all of its tomatoes in a very short amount of time, in the course of 2 to 3 weeks. You don't need to trellis them. They only grow about this tall. You tend to stake them instead. Should you grow determinants in the hoop house? I think it's a waste of space. You can grow them outside because they don't need trellising. But if you want to, there's no reason. And then, why does that? Oh, I keep touching my little thing here. Okay, so getting started. I space them. I start my seeds, indoors, 3 to 4 weeks before I transplant them out. 12 to 24 inches in a row, 1 row per bed. 12 is what I've been doing. 24, I'm really kind of interested in whether I can get the same production if I space them out. And when you start paying almost $1 a seed for some varieties, you can save a lot of money not planting 40 or 50 extra tomatoes when you don't need them. I don't know yet whether there are people who do plant at 2 feet and then report good results. Before I finish that, I did want to say one thing about one more variety. Rebelski. Anybody here ever grown Rebelski? Don't. The most beautiful, perfect red tomatoes on foliage that will not die. They taste like crap. They're just awful. I do not know why they're still in the catalog. I grew them 1 year and had that experience. I said, I'll never grow these again. But I was having such trouble with leaf mold. I said, okay, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to leave them on the vine for a long time and see whether the taste will really come out of the ear. Doesn't. They're just awful. Anyway, you can make sauce out of them, but don't try to grow them for food. Rebelski, remember that name. Transplant as early as you dare. I have been going with mid to late April. I think this year I'm going to go for mid-April and see what happens. So much is individual season dependent. If we get an ugly cold spell at the end of April, I might regret it. The problem is not that your plants will die from frost, because you can keep them from frosting almost any time after the bit of a March. In a hoop house, you get these nice strong sun coming in, cover them with, put on low hoops, cover them with a couple layers of row cover. It's going to be nice, but it's not going to be warm enough for them until the days really start warming up. And the problem is that long periods of cold weather on young tomatoes will trigger their flowering. And even if you don't see it in the first month, which you might, actually about a month after being ground, it will set their course for the rest of the season. And so the plants, they just don't grow very fast. The stems are tiny and they have these little knuckle things where they're supposed to be full. When you see a plant growing like that, if it's not too late, rip it out. Just plant something else in there. It's never, ever going to make you happy. So I say hedge your bets. And if you get that cold spell and you're worried about it, I would do some interplanting. So if you've got your tomatoes at every foot, but you've had a really rotten period after that, maybe put your new transplants, in between and see who makes it faster. I'll bet you your late ones will beat your early. So
you do your starts in the hoop house with
not for anything that's temperature sensitive.
So you do them in your.
I had a basement seating,
And you just have a grow light or something.
Yeah, and tomatoes 3 weeks, sometimes 4, just depending on when it goes along. These last year was 4, but that was.
Do you do any grafting with your tomatoes?
So what I do though, I use cutworm collars. These are pieces of metal flashing. If you're going to make cutworm collars, just get some metal flashing, cut them pieces, last you for the rest of your growing days. I put them in. I add some fertilizer, whatever I add minerals, and then I add a little bit of blood meal, a little bit of nature safe, and then I cover them with hoops. You can see a hoop up there, and then I cover them with a couple of rows of row cover. Keep the house itself up, closed up tight, and they did pretty well. Yeah.
You're using aluminum flashing, not lead flashing. just want to put that out there.
I guess you can. Yeah, aluminum flashing. Cheap as you can get. Cut it into 2x6 inch strips. Fold it into triangle. Cutworms will no longer be a problem for you. It's great. Okay.
Where are you putting the flashing? Sorry.
Oh yeah, so that's what these are. These are cutworm collars made out of flashing. I don't know if you use drinking cups or something like that, they just fall apart. And the other nice thing about it is you can take them off in the season because they're just they're an unsealed triangle. Okay. As I say, trellising really is the beauty of the hoop house. I do want to say something important here, which is about trusses of the hoop house, not trusses of tomatoes. On the hoop house, this structure right here is the truss, and it's what gives the hoop house the strength to hold all of the weight of the tomatoes. So if your hoop house has these cross pieces, but not these things right here, and you hang 5, 6, 7, 800 pounds of tomatoes on it, it will bounce. You're not doing your structure any favor. You need to have the complete truss structure in order to support that weight. Once that's in place, I have the 3 different ways I do it here on this picture. I don't know if you can see it. Here's wire up here on the upper left. That's a pretty sad piece of wire, but over time it has stretched. You can stretch it back and tighten it up, and it works pretty well, and it's cheap and it's almost free. Back here, pieces of rebar, which over the season have bent slowly. It's not terrible. The rebar has enough roughness on it that the things don't all slide together, but it's not very attractive either. Or you can use black pipe, which doesn't bend, or you can throw 2x4s up there, from truss to truss, and then hang on that. Now I remember there was something I thought of the other day. I said, I've got to put that in my first presentation. And then I didn't write it down and I forgot to do it. For those of you who heard earlier about hoop house building, what I said, what I thought was, when you build your end walls, it's a really smart idea to put here's your end wall, to put a cross piece on your end wall that's the same height as your trusses. And that way you can run a wire from this truss to that piece of your end wall and get maximum, hangability in your house. I didn't do that because I didn't think about doing my houses. And so from here to my end wall, which is 4 feet, I don't grow. Anyway, if you're building, it's a good idea. The cheap way to do it is with wire for sure. And there's no reason to spend a lot of money on rebar, but if you have it hanging around, if you have some old pipe hanging around, it works real well. But put up wire. You might want a clothespin to keep these hooks in place, because if the wire does go like this, they will go down to the clothespin. Or even better, I think I have a picture of this in the next slide. No, I don't. Actually, the trellis clips, you get them at Johnny's or other stuff. They're little plastic things that go like that. I think you know one. I have a picture of them somewhere. Little trellis clip, they're called, which you use on the string for the tomato to hold the tomato in place on the trellis. Also works real well up on that wire just to keep the thing going on. Now, this here is a roller hook. Goes over a piece of wire. That spool has string on it, goes down. You clip your tomato to it, and then the really, really good growth over the course of the season. As that tomato gets taller and taller, and the truss and the tomatoes down here have been harvested, and you've got a bare stem, they let that string out so that your plant, which was formerly perfectly erect, is now down like this, lower and lean. And over the season, what happens is the plant that was growing up like this with its stem, with its root right below it, that plant is now over here about 6 feet. That's fine. And it keeps your harvestable tomatoes nice and close to the ground. So you don't have to keep going up on a ladder to get the ones that are up. I have tried this. It's a combination of things. One is that in order to do it, you have to harvest your tomatoes before you lower the thing down to the ground. Otherwise, your tomatoes are on the ground. And that can be a bit of a timing problem. And the other is by August, by the time this really comes into play as a strategy, by August, my plants look like that. And you can't really lower those plants. But if you go into somebody's greenhouse where you see that, you can say, wow, you really know what you're doing. Oh, and then the last note on that was just, how about dropping them early for frost? I think that's a good idea. In other words, you're going to have killing frost in, say, late September, and you know you've still got 2 or 3 weeks of growing time on your tomatoes. There's no reason in the world not to unhook them from the top, lay them down on the ground, cover them with row cover, and they'll survive. They'll survive great. And you could put them back up if you know you've got good weather, but you might not once a week. You could actually just leave them on the ground, continue to harvest off the ground. It's a little pain.
Bending the stems like that doesn't hurt them.
Yeah, they're very, very bendy stems. In fact, I didn't say, and I should here, so you've got a string coming down, you've got your plant coming up, you're going to wind your tomato around that string. No, they're very, very flexible. And, and flipping off the leaders so that you're getting them.
So yeah. I thought that was your concern in lowering plants like that, but what's your concern then if it's not the vine and its integrity?
What's my concern? My concern is the plant, by the time it's time to lower them, which is beginning of August, my personal plants have gotten out of control.
Oh, okay.
Right. You have to be scrupulous about pruning them so that they're not branching all over the place. And my cherry tomatoes just go wild. You have to have harvested all the lower truss tomatoes, which is usually the case, and you also have to. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's helpful. And it's not the case that you've got 10 different varieties in the row and the timing thing.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. You can keep track of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Question.
interesting. It looks like
Yeah, this is a bit of a jungle.
Yeah.
It's not quite as bad as it looks because all this down here is leaf mulch. It just looks the same. No, I can still get through there with my wheelbarrow. That's, you know, I've got three feet of space
So
there.
you're just harvesting from the front.
Yeah, so I'm harvesting here. I'm reaching around on these plants. I'm walking down the rows, the middle rows like this, or with my harvest bucket, putting them in and then putting them on my wheelbarrow.
So there's a row on the other side.
Oh, yeah, I've got tomato mostly empty, and then another tomato here. I've got tomato here. I happen to leave one empty because I didn't have to have the storage. But in fact, there's another place you might think about as you get more comfortable growing is, do I really need tomatoes that close? Because the air circulation and therefore the health of the plants will be much better if you plant every other row. And then you can plant, you know, arugula or something in the middle row. It's not going to cut down the air. Yeah.
This past year, we had our tomatoes going through end of September, but the taste changed.
Yeah.
The weather got
Absolutely.
cold.
Yeah. That's why I was pointing out those varieties that do taste a little bit better. They're still better than most of what your customers can get anywhere that's not a local. But for people who are snobs, as I am, about tomato taste, I hate to say, you know, Hopestill Farm tomatoes in October, unless I'm selling them Jasco. Yeah.
Given that drive, or have you grafted at all? So you can get ones that you really like that taste great, but the root, it doesn't really want to be inside.
I haven't grafted. I haven't bought any grafted plants. We as farmers do a lot of unnatural things, including growing in the first place, right? We don't live on the Great Plains. But it's just one of those things where I don't have to do it because I'm sort of, you know, stuck in my ruts. I would not discourage you from trying it for sure, especially if you can get it for resistance to leaf mold. But I'm not sure that there are any grafts for leaf mold because it's what's up top that matters. Now, it may be that a great leaf mold, great taste tomato just has crappy roots, and then you can put a strong root on that. I don't actually. I better keep moving. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just real
That's right.
quick. When you were saying you start them inside and then you bring them out and
Yeah.
you worry about the period of cold.
Yeah.
On the tomatoes. What's cold? Like,
What's cold?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a rule of thumb for you, but if I transplant my tomatoes, let's say on April 15, and we have 5 days in a row that doesn't make it above 45 outside and doesn't get sunny, I'm trembling because I think that's a lot of cold for my poor little guys that were just in 75-degree full sun. But you know, what are you going to do except plant some others right behind them? Disease and pest and leaf mold is a problem. There are resistant varieties. Do try to increase your air circulation. Some people, I don't do this. Prophylactic micronized copper farm. Copper is, you know, a spray of copper is a good prophylactic for leaf mold, and it's organic food. You don't have to worry about it. But getting it small enough droplets is not something you can do with a hand pump sprayer. You're going to end up with big droplets on your plant. It'll be unsightly by the time your tomatoes are sizing up. You got a bunch of, you know, blue copper droplets on your tomato. You have to wash every one of them before you sell it. Not because you couldn't eat the copper, but because nobody will buy it. There is a electric powered micronizer. Shut down the hoophouse, spray it out once a week or whatever the schedule is. Works really well. It costs, here the Bolts catalog, I'll tell you about that at the end. Costs, I don't know, $1,500 or something like that, a couple thousand. It works. And it will increase your yield for sure. And then I say, don't give up. The late rally is common. Leaf mold is bad from beginning of August, especially into middle of September. But if you're still growing at that point, your plants will have green tips. They will continue to make tomatoes, and they'll stop getting leaf mold. Hornworms, I'm sure you know about. I just love that picture. But do scout them daily. They can get out of control. On to cucumbers. Cucumbers are a good moneymaker if you go to market, and if you're doing the CSA, or if you're doing retail sales, or if you're doing restaurants, you're the chef who's attuned to a good cucumber taste. You can make some money on cucumbers. I space them out at 12, start them inside again, space them out at about 12 inches. No reason to go wider than that as far as I can tell. I say ideally every other bed, because if you're doing them, one bed, all at the same time, there's very little air circulation that gets to that middle bed, and you'll get more problems. And also, because they will grow to your roof and back, you're going to cut down the amount of light that middle bed can get. You get this lovely sort of forested chamber on either side of you as you walk down 2 rows of cucumbers, but production does go down for sure. Again, I use row cover just so I can keep them up earlier. So I put it in earlier. No reason to try to trellis them early because the tendrils won't form until they're a few weeks in. And then once they start to form, here's that black clip I was talking about, the trellis clip to hold it onto the string. I wind those as well, even though they will use their own tendril to hold on. They're not always efficient. You want to go in and wrap them, and check them every day. You won't have to wrap them every day, sure, but every few days. 1 liter per plant. By the time they get up to the top of your trusses and you're ready to have them come back down again, which is a wonderful feeling. The advice is to flip all the side shoots on the way up, and then let 2 grow at that point to go down, and then continue to clip side shoots. That's a good idea. I do the first part of that. By the time I had finished clipping everything to allow the second side shoot to go down, it's just, they go wild, and I get enough cucumbers, and I'm sure it will. If they get all the way back down, you can send them back up. Usually at that point, my experience anyway, is some will do that for sure, but I've lost a fair number at that point to cucumber beetles. So there it is, straight below the trusses. And then I put this down here just because it's the only really quantitative stuff I have. I can get out of a 44-foot bed in my 48-foot house, I can get 10 to 20 cucumbers per day, consistent, which is a lot of cucumbers. I can sell them. I can sell them more than $1 each. I'm not sure I can sell that many at $1.50, but I can certainly sell them at $1. And that's over the course of the season. That's $1,500 from that day. And you're going to have in your cucumber house, say, you're going to have 3, maybe 4. Time is pushing it, in my opinion. Beds. You could pay back your house in a couple of years. And that's pretty spectacular. And there's no reason to think that tomatoes can't do the same thing. I just don't have that data on tomatoes. I don't think you do the same with peppers and eggplant. I know you can't do the same with eggplant unless you really have good eggplant market. And I haven't found anybody who really. Yes. Yeah. I'm going to come real close.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What's your approach to wilt?
Right. See, I start by praying. Now I'll tell you what. So the question was, what's the approach on bacterial wilt? It is the single biggest problem for cucumbers. And if you don't have bacterial wilt, you are just going to have oodles and oodles of production. Bacterial wilt is carried by cucumber beetles, which I think I show on the next slide. So we'll just go on the next slide. That's the cucumber beetle, the striped cucumber beetle. There's a spotted one as well. At least on my farm, we mostly got striped. They carry bacterial wilt. It's not the beetle itself that's your real problem. It's the bacteria, because they feed on the plant, and it's primarily, as I understand it, feeding on the roots of the plant. The larvae of the bee in the soil feeding on the roots, transmitting the bacterium, which clogs the phloem. I believe it's the phloem, but it might be the xylem, it might be both. And you get a very quick and oftentimes complete die-off of the plant. You see it one day and it's fine. The next day you'll see some leaves that are going like this, and then the next day Many of them will, and the day after that, plants dead, and there's nothing you can do about it. So exclusion is the answer. There is no treatment. I put insect netting screen, this protect net, on the side of my cube house. That's why I have a cube house. I rotate that every couple of years, because no matter what I do, cucumber beetles will get in. They'll begin to colonize the soil over the winter, and then I'll have more problems the second year, but I can usually manage them. But if I try the third year, it would probably be exercise and heartbreak. So, I put this on. If you've got a peak vent, you have to put screen on that as well. It really has to be closed in. And then I use, because there are no pollinators coming in, I use a variety that does leaf pollination. Parthenoclipic is the general term for that. Corinto is the best thing that's ever happened to cucumber production, as far as I'm concerned. It's just an extraordinary cucumber. I'll get you. They usually appear in, at least in my house, right around the time of the first harvest, which is a month or so after I transplant, maybe five weeks after I transplant. That's when they'll start showing up. And you'll think first, oh, there's only a couple of them, that's fine. But over time, they'll get you. Hunt them daily, which I do. I walk like this, and this really looking up and down at the cucumbers. And I also have zucchini in the same house, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Zucchini is a great trap crop. Yes, ma'am.
I just realized, I was just going on, what do you do about pollination?
About pollination?
Pollinators in the house.
Yeah, so for cucumbers, you buy a part of the carbon variety. You could do it by hand.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but there's no reason to, as far as I know, because this is the best variety there is. I'm going to go on, and then, but we'll come back to cucumber beetles when we talk about zucchini. Varieties. So here's Corinto on the right. They don't always look like this. You only take the pictures that look the best, right? But this was extraordinary. And in fact, the first slide, the title slide for this presentation was also Corinto. With a well-fed, very healthy set of plants, though, you will find that every once in a while. This is, by the way, two different plants right close together. So it's not as though one plant's going to give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 all together. But you can get one as they go on. It's just I love this plant. Seeds are about 50 cents a piece, worth every penny. Make sure when you start them that you are starting them in a sterilized tray, in soil where they can really get a jump, because they will succumb to damping on if the tray is dirty. Not every time, they're not as bad as some crops, but losing $20 worth of seed like that is a little bit of a royal pain. Yeah.
You mentioned putting summer squash between the cubes so that the cubes have more.
I'm sorry, say again?
Using summer squash,
yeah,
like zucchini or whatever,
yeah,
in between the rows, so you have a short crop between the tall crops.
yeah.
And also maybe some of the beetles will.
Yeah, in fact, for zucchini, I'll say now, it's the next slide coming up, zucchini is a great trap crop. Now, this may be the drunk in the light bulb issue, that you can really see them easily in the zucchini flower. And that's where they are. But I'm pretty sure that when I do my daily scouting, I look at everything and I find, let's say I find 3 or 4 cute beetles on the cucumbers themselves, I will find 10, 15, 20 on the zucchini, and I've got 2 rows of zucchini in there. Especially early in the morning, they do seem to congregate on the zucchini flowers just as they open up, or maybe just at the end of the day, and then they close up and stay in them. So I would really recommend it, even if you're not trying to grow production zucchini in your hoophouse. It's a good way to do it. A couple of other quick varieties, and I've got to keep moving. Mini Me, I assume that's how that's supposed to be pronounced, is a tiny little cucumber, it grows about that long, about that big around. It's a nice little, cocktail cucumber. That's a pint box, and you can stuff a pint box and get reasonable money for it. Again, you got to know your market. During the school year, it's a good, send them to school with kids. But most of your food production is in the summer rather than the school year. But kids love them, I guess. I've sold them to mostly parents. And then this is an Asian cucumber. I don't have any experience with this variety. I've grown a different one. My experience, and I'm not just a small-time grower, is my customers want this, and if they see this, they'll be entertained. But if I give them a choice, they'll take this. I don't find too much call for the Asian cucumbers, and so I've stopped growing either of those two little ones because I'm not losing money, and in fact, I'm making money by growing more of the standard ones. Zucchini, I do grow them in the hoop house. This is not one of the Mefford top 8, but I like growing them. You can get an early start, and they will produce all summer long. And that plant will, a well-fed zucchini plant with a hoop house will produce a zucchini about every 3 days. And that's 3 days over a 5-month period. That's a lot of zucchini. I start them out at about a foot apart, maybe a little bit more than that, sort of staggered. I put them mostly on my edges, and they take over. They will grow into your rows, and it's a good idea to either let them and walk around them or train them early. My experience is, if you try to train them late, now they pick that plant up and move it, they don't really like it very much. It takes them a while to really get their back on their feet. Pan pollinating is a great thing to do. It's really fun. Zucchini plants will come as male and female, and you just pick the male flower off, pull the petals off, and then just go over the female, brush it. You don't need to spend much more time like that. And then what I do is I rip off a piece of the female petal to signal to myself that I've already fertilized this one. There's no reason to come back and do it again because it'll be there the next day. It takes a couple of days for the petals to disappear. So hand pollinate, fun and education. Squash bugs are a problem. Can be a problem. They will get in even if you have screening. Cucumber beetles will get in, squash bugs will get in. The numbers will be way down. I mean, I don't need to be fatalistic, but squash bugs just keep switching. I had a terrible problem with spreading a squash bug in one of my houses, but I won just by going in there and keeping after them. And by the time mid-September rolls around, they're done, and you won't have problems with them.
You've been squishing them for 4 months.
So
you've been squishing them for 4 months.
I've been squishing them for about 2 months. They weren't a problem at the beginning of the season, and then they find their way in, and it's a real pain to hunt for them because you got to pick up every leaf, and the leaves are scratchy, and you got to get all the way around. So it gets out of control sometimes. But then you can use, I forget what you can use on squash bugs, but mostly you just hand pick them, and you're not just going after the adults. The egg cases are really fine. They're right on the leaves. You probably have seen them. Just rip those off. I tried for a while, scratch them off like this, but the leaf dies right there anyway. I just started ripping them off, and it's fine. And you just stick them in your pocket or.
Is that the same as the squash borer?
Yeah.
No, different crop altogether, and different insect altogether. A squash borer, I don't know what the adult looks like. You can find a picture.
She's got like a red and black wasp.
Yeah, and they will, get right into your base.
You can find
I've seen 1 or 2 in my hoop houses. They don't seem to get in. As these other guys do. But yeah, you got to worry about them. Okay. Peppers and eggplants. I grow these in a tunnel. I'm not really sure because I have the space. I'm not really sure it's the very best use of hoop house. What do you think about it? Would you reintroduce yourself again?
I'm James Parent. I'm with Rimmel Greenhouses, but I'm actually here to learn.
Yeah, no, that's fine. But do you see many people growing peppers and eggplants?
Yeah, actually peppers are grown in Canada. Most of the peppers you get at the grocery store come from Canada in greenhouses.
Inside.
You can trellis them up like you do tomatoes, and they'll just produce forever.
Yeah.
Eggplant, less so, because you don't make as much money off of them. But I know from experience, my eggplant produce like crazy in the greenhouse.
Yeah.
So they're fantastic.
So this is mine. This is this year. You know, as I like to say, every once in a while I commit agriculture, and that's a pretty good looking stand of peppers.
Yeah.
The other thing about this year, and I wish I had planned, is that peppers want cold temperatures early, not frozen by any means, but they want cool nights early in their growth. And Johnny says, and I think they're right, after 3 sets of leaves come out, you want them to have a cool night, like a week or a week and a half of cold nights, and that triggers the flowering response. That same thing you see in tomatoes that you don't want, but in peppers it works really well. These things were just gushing peppers. Oh, something wrong. I could not believe it. I'm thinking like 15, 20 peppers per plant. It's just crazy. I had way more than I had markets for, and that's my fault. I should have done some more markets for. Anyway, for the way I grow peppers, I have not trellised them. You could run them on a string. I've never seen a pepper except maybe a Baron, which is a poblano pepper, which grows up about this high. I've never seen a pepper that really, I said to myself, geez, I wish I had trellised that rather than staked it. But those are 6-foot stakes, and by the end of the season, they are some of them at least. So it's not that you can't. Just I don't. I had the stakes.
In Canada, they get up 14, 15, 18 feet.
Wow. Yeah. I bet they're heating their greenhouses.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
they have the cheap electricity.
Yeah. That's another conversation.
And then you
Say that.
Oh no, these are acres of greenhouse.
Yeah.
They have heating.
Yeah. Commercial production, you do trellis. I grow Ace peppers, Carmen peppers. Those are kind of standard varieties. Ace is a bell pepper. Carmen is a Corn Toro, bullthorn. And then Orient Express as my eggplant. I don't sell much eggplant. I include it in my CSA every once in a while for retail sales, but really much. Same for you.
Actually, we've got a bunch of people that really love the eggplant, and we found that the Oriental eggplants have really taken off. Partly because we've got a fair number of agents that come to the stand.
Yeah.
But people will be standing there looking at the typical Italian big black eggplant.
Yeah.
And then these skinny, long purple ones.
Yeah.
They go, what do I do with those? And then the Asian, well, here's what you do.
Here's what you do.
Yeah. And then once they've tried it, they go, why was I doing those Italians?
Yeah.
I mean,
it is so true. They are such a much better plant, he says, with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. But in fact, they're great. And the nice thing about peppers, and it's sort of true of eggplants as well, the season can last really long. The plants they're not frost hardy, but they are cold hardy. And if you cover them inside your hoop house and close your hoop house up, you can really beat the first few frosts. And they will keep producing peppers for you. And then if you see it really killing frost, and as I say, I don't think I have survived 25 degrees outside, inside my, if you see 25 in your forecast, I think you're done. No matter what you got, no matter any of the temperature sensitive plants that grow inside. But you can harvest those peppers, and many of them, if they're green, will ripen to red, and they're delicious. They'll get a little bit flabby, but they're really quite delicious. We're going to now go a little bit quickly through the cold hardy stuff. Spinach, a very, very high value crop. I plant my spinach in October and plan to do a light harvest in December, and then let it overwinter inside the hoop house, under cover or not, and then harvest it again in March. And it's the first thing my spring salad CSA people get is a bag full of overwintered spinach, and it is the best tasting spinach you will ever have. It's so sweet, so crunchy, and such a nice earthy taste. It's just absolutely good. If you don't grow any other cold hardy crop in the hoophouse, put some spinach in at the end of the season and let it overwinter. Do the same thing with carrots, and it'll just knock your socks off. Yeah.
Remind us the watering during the winter. You don't need.
Yeah, watering is a good question. Watering during the winter it's a bit of a head scratcher because you want the soil to be moist, but you don't want it to be really damp. And it's not going to transpire very much, certainly when it's not sunny. But then when the sun comes out for a few days, you actually do want that dampness there. I don't know. I mean, I don't have a good answer. I'm kind of hoping my plants go down deep in October and then make it through those times I'm not very good about. By the way, and thank you for bringing up as well, back in the other lecture, the question of how to get water to your hoop house, if you've got underground, if you've got a frost-free source, you're in like Flint, you can grow anything anytime. If you don't, if you're going to be bringing it in through a hose overground, September, October, November will be fine. December's a little dicey, but you could get the soil dampen off in early November. You probably don't have to worry about it. You don't worry about January and any of that. February and March are the real challenges because running that hose overground during that part of the winter means it has to drain out as soon as you finish watering with it, or else it's going to freeze up. And then it may be a month before it unfreezes, or pull it inside your house and give it a few days. And then, okay. Yeah.
Do you know anything about perennial crops in the hoop house?
I have not grown any perennial crops in hoop houses. I don't know of any immediately thinking about it. I would recommend.
Well, I don't grow vegetables.
What's that?
I don't grow vegetables. So.
Yeah. There may be perennial flowers that would be
yeah,
very
I was just thinking about the water issue, what I would use it for, and the only problem would be perennials needing something.
Yeah. And the other thing
they
is,
don't though, because they're asleep.
If you've got good road access, you can just fill up a whole bunch of gallon jugs. It's not, in March, your plants don't need that much water. You actually could do that if you haven't got a hose coming in. I'm going to keep moving here, but anyway, I rarely recommend spinach. High value crop, certainly.
I was going to ask what kind of aphid you have the most trouble with on spinach.
What kind of
aphid you have the most trouble with on spinach?
I'm sorry. I'm still.
What kind of aphids you have the most trouble?
Oh, aphids. I was just about to go on and not talk about aphids because I hate to talk about aphids. These are your garden aphids, not the kind that gets on your kale, which I don't know whether that's a separate species or whether it's a reaction they put on that fluffy gray stuff. No, these are just standard garden variety aphids. They can really get out of control. Not in January, but if you've got overwintered spinach that you're starting to harvest in March and you see an aphid problem, get on it right away with lady beetles. I would go in there with heavy spray of water. They'll come back on, but some of them won't, and do that. If it's really early in the spinach crop's life, if there's still baby leaves and you're going to harvest big leaves, I would say you could use safer soap and then spray it off as the leaves get bigger. I think that would be fine. But get on it. I don't have enough time to tell you my really sad aphid story from this spring. But I did a heroic battle with aphids in one of my hoop houses, and I really didn't think I was going to win. I did eventually, but it was bad. Okay, we'll go on. Lettuce, it's a big money maker. Lettuce is a big money maker because you can bring fresh lettuce to your chefs or your CSAs or your retail customers well into December and then again in March. I have not found a lettuce that will make it through the winter. There are some, but they taste awful by the time they're going through January. Unlike spinach, they just, there's some of the deer tongue lettuces, but there's not. I could be wrong, but people still talk about it, but I just haven't found. If you're going to be doing interplanting, and say you plant your rows in early March, harvest the center one first and make room for the tomatoes or whatnot. New Red Fire is a really, really cold hardy concept, is really pretty good. I love panise, which is like a Boston lettuce, like a deer tongue beans, more like a Boston. It's got a problem in that the bottom leaves really hug the soil. You pretty much have to take those off in earnest, but it's really delicious. People like it a lot. And then outrageous, which is a very fast growing reds. They were pretty well. I do not have, except for when aphids get out of control, then you'll find them on here. Other than that, I have not found real problems with lettuce in the hoop house. Row cover is essential for lettuce in a way that it's not for spinach. You need row cover to grow lettuce successfully into December for sure, and probably November. Probably not October. You can probably get it out. I pretty much put row cover on it, transplant and move it on, unless I've got a problem with bulbs, and then take it off because they think they're, protected when they're underneath it. There's a bunch of other crops. There's so many things in rosemary that you can grow in a hoop house. The question of money. I've made a lot of money on arugula and kale. I've made some money on chard, carrots, and cilantro. I haven't really made much money on deep greens, basil, or radishes. Kind of anybody makes money on radishes. But again, your mileage may vary. If you've got a market for, a particular crop, if you're working with a chef, or you've got a particular CSA target market that's really valuing some of the daikon radishes or something like that, grow them because they'll grow better in there than they will outside. And you grow one and it'll be sweeter by the time you finish harvesting the same. That might be. Oh yeah, varmints, wolves, cats, snap traps. You're going to cut down on their environment, on their preferred environment, keep the outside grass around the calendar, keep that outside grass just as low as you can, as long as you can. And then they really like to burrow underneath things. This is covering up, trying to kill some quack grass. But the bulls burrowed under there. Just keep that stuff out of there if you can. Aphids we talked about. And then the things you can keep out with deer fencing. I think I showed you a picture. Maybe I didn't show you. Did I show you guys a picture of this? That was so much. Anyway, deer fencing on your hoop house sides, attached here and then up at the hip boards will keep deer out. We'll mostly keep out woodchucks and rabbits. If you go instead of the sort of the 2x2 or 3x3 squares on the fencing, if you go down to sort of bird netting size, you'll get plenty of air movement, and you'll also keep out rats. You might even help keep on bulls, but I've never seen a bull go over. They always, as far as I know, go under. So you keep out a lot of varmint just by putting that stuff on. And then if you put that screen on, you can keep out chickpeas. Finishing up quickly here. Here's a possibly yearly cycle for the ambitious. In a stationary house, 30 by 48, ground only, unheated. In mid-October, you pull those tomatoes, keep some tender buds, and you have to be ruthless because you've got to make room for the stuff that you're going to plant over the winter. I always say to myself, oh, but I could make another 15, 20 bucks on these tomatoes. Well, take it out. Do bed prep and plan to do that, overnight as much as you can. Every day you lose in October is probably a week in the spring for a crop that's going to overwinter. In other words, you plant a day later in October, that crop is probably going to be not ready for harvest for next week. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's not much actually. In late October, so you might need your eggs, bed, peppers, and so forth in and get those. But anyway, as soon as that stuff comes out, have your lettuce, your spinach transplants ready to go in. Put them in. Start some extra so you can fill in. You can also, by the way, plant spinach direct seeded, I would not wait until after mid-September or maybe late September to direct seed, which is about the time I'm starting by seedlings as well. Fill those in with new transplants, and then you can harvest that lettuce into December. I harvested my last lettuce about a week and a half ago, but we've had a pretty warm spell here. I've been harvesting some spinach just on my own, and then in late February, as it starts to warm up, and especially as the days get longer, you'll see your spinach start to grow again, and you can get those going. You can transplant in some lettuce. You can direct seed and move it up deep greens. You're not going to see much growth on those things, and you're going to wonder why you bothered. But they will begin to take off about a month or so after you put them in. And then in mid-April, in that same house, transplant in your warm weather crops, and then get out the other stuff as you harvest it or as it bolts or whatever it happens to do. It works. This will actually work. That as it's really ambitious, it's really disciplined, but it actually does work. You can make that work. And if you don't make it work the first year, try it again. See if it'll work in the second year. And then I run a spring salad CSA. 14 weeks, we start with early spinach, and after that, we go to lettuce. I also do pea shoots indoors to supplement in the first couple of weeks. Run for 14 weeks. Spinach, pea shoots, lettuce, arugula, carrots, Asian greens. And then by the time we're done in May and early June, we've got some outdoor stuff as well. I say finish with cukes, maybe. I don't like to give my cukes away. When people sign up for a spring salad CSA, I tell them that they were doing great. I could get cucumbers ready, and that's why I said on the cuke slide, I said earlier as possible, earlier than the start I did. When I was timing my cukes so that I didn't have a boatload of cukes ready in the first week of June because I'd feel bad about not getting to my CSA people and selling them to somebody else. So instead, I just waited. But anyway, you can get cukes for early June if you want to. The same as zucchini. I think this is a really good thing for somebody with a hoop house to shoot for, because everybody loves early fresh greens, and they will pay you for it. I charge my customers this year is 110 for these 14 weeks, and that's a bag, like a gallon bag. It's about a half a pound, maybe at most 3/4 pound of greens every week. And they love it, and people keep coming back year after year after year. And I think that's the last slide. Oh, a couple of things on resources. Books by Elliot Coleman, including the 4th Season Harvest. If you're really interested in cold weather and growing, he's absolutely good. I am not familiar with this, but Pam Donnelly is here. She's doing some other workshops, and she's been writing about gardening. She writes for the Market Growers newsletter. She knows what she's talking about. And then this is the book by Andrew Befford, which I recommend. I will say one thing about this book, which I think I said at the beginning, but I'll just say it again. I really do recommend this book. You'll learn a whole lot, but I think he associates too much heated growing with completely unheated growing. Not like 75-degree growing, but somebody with a propane heater that can keep their house above freezing as long as they want to. That's one kind of growing. And then completely unheated growing, to me, it's just different enough that they're really different prescriptions. And so as you read his book, just keep that in mind. There's a lot of stuff you could do with some propane that you can't do, at least not reliably, without. I'm not recommending propane by any means. Happy that I use it. There it is. And then finally, happy to take any more questions. And again, my shameless promotion. I am offering to benefit NOFA consultation that I have no idea if that's actually the content or not. Yes, ma'am.
What about solar heating?
What about solar heating? You mean exterior to the hoop house and bringing that in?
Can you do that?
I guess you could. One thing that with the price of panels coming down the way that it is becoming reasonable to ask whether a bank of solar panels right behind your hoop house, like 15 feet away, getting solar energy, charging a battery inside the house to keep your house, and then using electric heat, which of course I grew up thinking was the most wasteful thing in the world, using electric heat, maybe with like a waterbed heater or something, that kind of in-ground heater, keeping your soil a little bit warmer, a little bit longer. It's very attractive. Huge investment out here. Okay. But on the other hand, potentially huge gain in here. And then there's no reason technically why these panels can't then feed the grid for the rest of the year and, cut money off of your electric bill as well. I'm not sure you can get away with that with the power company yet, taking your system on and off. I have solar panels, but they only feed the grid. They don't feed my house. But the next thing I do, I'm going to be investigating one of that kind of system.
It would be so expensive. And also you have to have dedicated electric. You have to have a dedicated box for your, so I mean, it just seems so expensive.
Yeah, but on the other hand,
just to cheat the season. I mean, it's like what you said about that book. You're talking about two different things, right?
Oh yeah, but instead of burning propane, you could actually do solar temperature moderation. I don't know. I haven't looked at the economics, and I'm not sure.
There's some interesting people doing. Oh, shoot, I forgot the word.
Something battery, right?
No, hydro, geothermal.
Geothermal.
And that not only for the heat, but the cool, and that's a climate change adaptation in some places because they see their I'll see our summers getting warmer, so that.
That's also a potential either geothermal system or what's called a climate battery system. If you look that word up, I know almost nothing about it except for that. But it's a way of taking your excess heat and storing it so that you can use it later.
So if you don't have anything going yet, you've got a new,
brand new,
as of December, you've skinned it. February, end of February is really the first time you're going to get in there because of like the day, but also the temperatures without a heating source and transplanting most things, some direct sow, but.
The only things that I would direct plants in a hoop house are things that I have trouble with starting to transplant. Spinach, I get a lot of damping off even when I'm careful. And it's other family members, so beets and chard. Just about everything else. And then if I was going to direct seed peas, but I would not recommend peas in the hoop houses. This is not the money in it. But other than that, I would transplant if I can. I mean, if I've got a place to talk about.
And then your transplants for tomatoes, peppers, like nightshades, 4-inch pots, 6-inch pots. What are you using in April?
I use soil blocks and I use 2-inch soil blocks for my tomatoes.
2-inch.
And by the time it depends. I'm going to see this year. I might really want to go in early. And then I'd probably just take my 2-inch soil block and stick it in the soil. But I might not. I might go into a 4-inch plastic pot. No, I don't have a 4-inch soil block. I might go into a 4-inch plastic pot and then let them sit for a couple of weeks. But if you're not going to transport, if you're not going to put that into a 4-inch pot, that it's going to be in there for at least 2 weeks, I'd say don't bother because it's not going to make a root ball. It's just the roots are just going to get hurt on the way out. I would just plant a little early, plant a little later, or transplant a little early, because I don't think you're going to get the benefit unless you really let it sit for a while.
I'm a little hard of hearing. I'm sorry. Just to confirm, you're going straight from soil block into the ground, and who hasn't used
with almost everything. There are some times when I start my tomatoes really early, that a 2-inch soil block, the plants are like this crazy, and I say, it's still too early. I'll put them in a 4-inch pot and I'll hold them for a couple of weeks. But I'll tell you, it gobbles up room in my seed room, and I don't like it because I've got a lot of other stuff that has to go in. So mostly what I'm doing is timing my 2-inch soil block planting to be transplanted directly into the soil.
You're wasting so much.
Yeah, I mean, we all do, right? But you can, end of April is a very, very reasonable time to put in tomatoes inside a hoop
I
house.
actually go to sidewalk in like a horse, like a fixed that were like moving in and out and now the house.
But wait a minute, when you say you're wasting time, the only question is whether that gets you earlier and more tomatoes, right? And I'm not sure that I have the system for earlier tomatoes, and I don't have a way to tell them. Yeah. I mean, and it may be that if you got the room indoors, and if you have, let's say if you had 3 hoop houses, I put propane. I really would, because I do have 3 houses, but they serve different functions. But I have 3 equivalent hoop houses. I think about putting propane, at least maybe screening off a third of it, so that I'm, and then growing on benches with plants that all I need to do is keep them above freezing. And then I might grow my tomatoes a little longer. I don't know. I mean, I talk about
What some people do is they go section off a small 12 or 15, small section, and then they put a little electric portable heater in there. But it's a small space. I mean, you're not heating 15 feet high. A small space, 4 or 6 feet high. Because that electric heater will run you. It could run you over $1,000 in a month.
Yeah.
Electric heat does not work in a greenhouse.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say anybody should use electric heat. On the other hand, you might look into bottom heating soil, as I said, a water bed heater or something like that to keep the bench warm. Maybe put that heater on top of something like stones or soil that will hold some of that heat, right. or put it underneath this thing. And then you've got some thermal mass in there. Cover it on all sides with plastic, put some insulation around it. And you could, then I would say, you could move your tomatoes in from the 2-inch soil blocks into those pots, keep those pots in your little hothouse profitably. And then you'd probably beat me to market. I bet you would. I had tomatoes one year on like the 26th of June. I've never gotten that again, but and then I've lost tomatoes that I tried to get in the 26th of June. So now I'm shooting for like first week. Yeah.
For your trellis system, you're not anchoring on the end walls.
See, now this is what I was talking about, is that if you build your end wall so that you can run all the way out of the end wall, then I would be anchored on the end wall. But no, I'm just wrapping wire around my trusses. Just wrapping wire, and then what I do, in fact, is on this truss, I'll wrap it like this, but then around the next one, I'll just go like that.
Yeah.
And then to the next one, I'll do that thing. And then I tighten them up as they get
And then for your trusses, do you have the experience where trusses were not attached to the bow and loading them, and they actually did? I have seen my. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Say it again. You were suggesting that if you don't have that additional support from the top of the bow down to the truss.
Oh, will it bend the cross piece? Oh, absolutely. And I would never, ever, ever want to see anybody do that.
Is there a manufacturer's recommendation here on an 18-foot wide one?
Do you have a truss?
Yeah, on each bow.
What I would do is I would go with a 2x6 on the end wall.
Yep.
Like lumber, 2x6 lumber. Up against the end wall, same height as the truss. Throw an eye bolt through it.
Yep.
And then your wire. Then go all the way on top of the trusses, just laying it on the wire on top.
Yep.
You get the wire right on Amazon. And then patch on the other side with a turnbuckle.
Yep.
And then you just tighten it up and tighten it up and tighten it up.
So most of it's on the end walls, but so it's got rest. There's only 3 rows for 18-foot wide, 48 feet.
And all the weight is pulling on the end wall. But you want to make sure your end walls are like with us, if somebody's going to trellis it, I always tell we have a high wind kit.
Got it. Yep.
Which I probably will when we're talking.
Yep.
And that will stiffen up your end walls. Yep. So it will take that weight. I haven't seen anybody have any issues.
Yeah, thanks.
But if you run it on top of the wires, like it's not on top of the trusses, you're only getting 4 feet pushing down on that one truss. Yeah. So you won't have the truss won't. It might flex a little bit, but I haven't seen it be any.
The other thing you can do, and I believe this voice you want to do, is just wrap some wire around the cross piece and then wrap it around. But then the question is, are you putting too much weight on your bow? But you're definitely taking the weight off the cross piece at that point.
It depends on the manufacturer. Ours could take it.
Yeah.
You could, or you could just take a small piece and connect it straight up, but you don't need it.
Yeah.
Just if you just put your 6-inch 2x6 on the end, bolt it, use strong wire. You don't want
Aircraft.
Yeah, or like they use it now for decks. Have you seen like they use deck railing? They have like fancy wires.
Yeah, it's aircraft, just the thin gauge aircraft.
You just use that
Wire rope.
Yeah, I will tell you about wire is I use the same wire that I had used for electric fencing.
Yeah.
And every year I assume it's going to rain. And it never does.
Just stretches a little.
A little bit, yeah. And then I just wrap it up in the
That's that.
Any other questions?
Like that's
before
how-
Yeah, I'm not sure what it's like. It's a
yeah, braided wire will be, yeah.
definitely wants to.
You can find it, if you go to, the home goods store, the home improvement store, somewhere in the rope wire, you'll see them. Yeah.
Amazon sells 500 feet of wire. They can one over it.
Yeah.
So it's easy. But it's like $60.
Thank you all very much. Thank you. If you do want the presentation, email me. I'm happy to send it. Here to the auction, paper. I'll be here.
I just want to make you repeat yourself because I was out.
Yeah.
But why no peppers on outside bed?
Oh, no, peppers on the outside bed is a great thing. They don't. There are some varieties I would not put on the outside bed, because I know they grow tall. Barron will get up here. Carmen will go through. It stays. And certainly if you have extended sides, I wouldn't worry about it at all. Shishito peppers, they stay really low. They're an excellent vegetable. So that's the only thing. It's a question.
Well,
Yeah, okay, I'm curious because I had very poor performance on the outside bed of my house this past year.
Say again?
This past year, I had very poor pepper performance.
Yeah.
On the outside bed.
Was 4.
Yeah, it was, well, I think it was too much nitrogen actually. It was
Yeah,
devastating.
I would not say we probably. It's just the ease of doing it, and then they will try to push up into the.
otherwise, the
Okay,
website.
thank you very much.
Thank you very much.